The Martin family lived in an affluent suburb on the outskirts of Seattle, Washington. Their home, a charming two-story colonial-style house, was nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac lined with maple trees. The neighbors often remarked on how the Martins embodied the ideal suburban family. Daniel Martin, 40, was a well-respected civil engineer who spent his days designing bridges and urban structures. His wife, Jessica Martin, 35, was a former middle school teacher turned stay-at-home mom. Together, they raised two delightful daughters, Chloe, an energetic 8-year-old with a passion for art, and Mia, a curious 6-year-old who loved playing in the yard with her stuffed animals. Most mornings, the sound of children's laughter echoed through the cul-de-sac as Chloe and Mia played outside before heading off to school. On this particular morning, however, the peaceful routine was shattered. A piercing scream cut through the quiet, sending shockwaves through the neighborhood. Linda Evans, the Martins' next-door neighbor, froze as she heard the sound. Holding her coffee tightly, she rushed inside her house, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone to call emergency services. The cul-de-sac, usually buzzing with morning activity, was eerily still as two police cruisers arrived minutes later. Officers Jack Reynolds and Emily Parker surveyed the area, noting the slightly ajar door of the Martin house. They approached cautiously, weapons drawn, prepared for any sign of danger. The silence inside was haunting. The living room was immaculate, with no signs of a struggle. Toys sat neatly in a basket by the fireplace, and a cup of coffee, half finished, rested on the kitchen counter. It was as if the home had frozen in time, an ordinary day interrupted by something unexplainable. As Officer Parker climbed the stairs to the second floor, her steps muffled by the plush carpet, Officer Reynolds continued to inspect the ground floor. In the dining room, bowls of cereal sat untouched on the table, while a faint metallic smell lingered in the air, growing stronger near the back hallway. Upstairs, Parker entered the master bedroom and found Jessica Martin seated on the floor, her back against the bed frame. Her hands trembled, streaked with what appeared to be blood, and her vacant stare reflected shock. She appeared uninjured but visibly distressed, as if consumed by a horror she could not articulate. Paramedics arrived shortly after and began attending to Jessica, who seemed unable to provide coherent answers to the officers' questions. Detectives were summoned to the scene, and Detective Laura Bennett, known for her meticulous attention to detail, took charge. The room appeared undisturbed apart from the blood-stained pillow on the floor and the disheveled bed. As crime scene technicians documented the area, Bennett surveyed the scene with a critical eye. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, and no furniture knocked over. Yet the unsettling stillness in the house hinted at something deeply wrong. While the technicians bagged the pillow for analysis, Bennett's attention turned to Jessica. Despite her trembling state, Jessica had no visible injuries that matched the blood on her hands. Meanwhile, outside, Linda Evans hesitantly approached the officers, her face pale and voice barely audible. She shared what she had seen the night before, describing how she had noticed Jessica leaving the house around midnight, carrying what appeared to be a large black bag. Although strange, Linda hadn't thought much of it at the time. Inside the house, investigators found a faint trail of blood leading toward the garage. Following it, they discovered an empty parking space where the family car should have been. The absence of the vehicle added another layer of mystery, prompting the police to issue an alert for the missing car. As the sun climbed higher, the once quiet cul-de-sac turned into a scene of mounting tension. Neighbors gathered on their porches, whispering in hushed tones as investigators meticulously combed through the house and yard for clues. The disappearance of Daniel, Chloe, and Mia seemed to defy logic, leaving the detectives with more questions than answers. What had started as an ordinary morning had turned into the beginning of a chilling mystery that would soon unravel the secrets hidden behind the seemingly perfect facade of the Martin family. The Martin family had always appeared to be the embodiment of the American dream. Their home stood as a symbol of stability, with its manicured lawn and perfectly trimmed hedges. Neighbors admired the seemingly harmonious family, and Daniel Martin was often described as a pillar of the community. Jessica Martin, once a vibrant middle school teacher, had embraced her role as a stay-at-home mom with dedication. From the outside, everything about the Martins appeared pristine, but as detectives began to dig deeper, the cracks in this perfect facade started to show. Detective Laura Bennett, now leading the investigation, delved into the family's background. Daniel was a civil engineer working on high-profile infrastructure projects, a job that often kept him away from home for days or even weeks at a time. His colleagues described him as diligent and professional, though perhaps a little withdrawn in recent months. Jessica, on the other hand, was seen as a doting mother. Her social media was filled with posts about her daughter's milestones, family holidays, and elaborate birthday parties she organized for Chloe and Mia. Yet some posts hinted at underlying tension. Vague captions like, "Keeping it together," or "Not every day is easy, but family comes first," painted a picture of a woman struggling to maintain control. Neighbors began to recall incidents that didn't quite align with the Martins' picture-perfect image. Linda Evans, who had already provided critical information about Jessica's late-night activity, mentioned hearing frequent arguments coming from the Martin household. The raised voices, though muffled, often carried accusations and frustrations that lingered in the still night air. Another neighbor, James Peterson, recounted a particularly heated argument he overheard just weeks before the incident. Though he couldn't make out every word, he distinctly remembered Jessica shouting something about lies and betrayal. Peterson hadn't thought much of it at the time, chalking it up to the normal stresses of family life. Now in hindsight, those moments took on a darker significance. As Bennett pieced together these fragments, she directed her team to dig deeper into the Martins' financial and personal records. What they uncovered painted a troubling picture. Daniel had been withdrawing significant amounts of money from the couple's joint account, often just days before returning from his work trips. Jessica's emails revealed she had recently hired a private investigator, suggesting she suspected Daniel of infidelity. The private investigator's report, delivered just days before the disappearance, confirmed Jessica's worst fears. Daniel had been involved with a co-worker, a young project manager named Rachel Brooks. The two had been seen together at restaurants and hotels, their interactions more intimate than professional. The report also included emails exchanged between Daniel and Rachel, discussing plans to leave Seattle and start a new life together. Jessica's friends, when interviewed, painted a picture of a woman on the edge. She had confided in one close friend, Emily Harris, about her fears of losing her family. According to Emily, Jessica had expressed feelings of betrayal and anger, even hinting at drastic measures to protect her daughters from the fallout of a divorce. Despite these revelations, Jessica maintained her version of events when questioned by detectives. She insisted that an intruder must have entered the house, attacked her family, and taken them away. Her story, however, grew increasingly inconsistent under scrutiny. Jessica couldn't explain why there were no signs of forced entry or why her car was missing. Meanwhile, forensic analysts examined the blood found at the scene. The sample from the kitchen floor was confirmed to match Daniel's DNA, and the faint trail leading to the garage suggested a body had been moved. The pillow with blood stains in the master bedroom raised further questions. Experts noted that the pattern of the stains was consistent with someone being smothered. The evidence began to weigh heavily against Jessica, but without the bodies of Daniel, Chloe, and Mia, detectives couldn't make definitive conclusions. Bennett decided to keep Jessica under close observation, while her team worked tirelessly to uncover more clues. As tension mounted, a new lead emerged. Surveillance footage from a gas station near the Martins neighborhood showed Jessica's car pulling in during the early hours of the morning. The footage captured her stepping out, wearing a hooded sweatshirt and gloves, and discarding a large bag into a dumpster before driving away. When investigators retrieved the bag, its contents confirmed their worst fears. Inside were blood-soaked clothes belonging to Chloe and Mia, along with a small stuffed bear Chloe always carried. The discovery was a devastating blow, turning what had initially seemed like a missing persons case into a probable double homicide. Detective Bennett felt the weight of the case pressing down on her. The evidence was mounting, but there were still critical pieces missing. Where were the bodies? And what had truly happened inside the Martin house that night? The neighborhood, once a sanctuary of safety and order, had become a place of whispers and fear. People avoided eye contact as they passed the Martin house, its cheerful facade now overshadowed by the darkness within. The Martins, once admired as the epitome of suburban success, were now the focus of a nightmare unraveling before the entire community. The disappearance of Daniel, Chloe, and Mia Martin had transformed the once idyllic cul-de-sac into a hub of unease. Neighbors who had once greeted each other warmly now exchanged guarded looks, their conversations dominated by speculation about the Martins' fate. With each passing day, the mystery deepened, and the weight of unanswered questions hung heavy over the community. Detective Laura Bennett, juggling mounting evidence and public pressure, worked tirelessly to piece together the fragments of the case. The discovery of Jessica's car on a secluded roadside several miles from the house provided a new lead. Forensic technicians meticulously combed through the vehicle, uncovering traces of blood on the passenger seat and a faint but unmistakable odor of bleach, suggesting a hasty attempt to clean up a crime scene. Jessica, under increasing scrutiny, remained in her parents' custody, but was prohibited from leaving town. Her demeanor oscillated between distressed mother and guarded witness. Bennett couldn't ignore the inconsistencies in Jessica's story. The lack of forced entry, the blood trail, and the gas station footage all pointed toward her involvement. Yet something about her apparent shock and disorientation felt genuine, leaving Bennett hesitant to draw definitive conclusions. As part of the investigation, the team interviewed Daniel's co-workers. One name surfaced repeatedly: Rachel Brooks, the project manager Daniel had been linked to romantically. When questioned, Rachel admitted to having an affair with Daniel, but denied any knowledge of his whereabouts. She described their relationship as complicated and confessed that Daniel had expressed doubts about leaving his family despite his unhappiness at home. Rachel's revelations painted a picture of a man torn between duty and desire. She claimed that their last conversation had ended abruptly after Daniel mentioned needing to resolve things with Jessica. Although Rachel's alibi checked out, her connection to Daniel added another layer of complexity to the case. Meanwhile, Bennett's team continued to analyze evidence from the Martin house. The blood trail leading from the kitchen to the garage suggested that at least one person had been severely injured, if not killed. A luminol test revealed faint footprints, indicating that the body or bodies had been dragged rather than carried. Forensic analysis of the blood confirmed it was Daniel's, but no traces of Chloe or Mia's DNA were found, leaving their fates uncertain. As the investigation unfolded, a chilling piece of information emerged from Linda Evans, the Martins' neighbor. She recalled seeing Daniel in the backyard late one evening, speaking on the phone in a hushed tone. His body language had been tense, and she overheard fragments of the conversation, including the words, "Can't keep doing this," and "she's starting to suspect." Linda initially dismissed it as a work-related issue, but now wondered if it had been something more sinister. The discovery of Daniel's phone in the woods near the gas station raised further questions. Investigators hoped it would provide clues, but the device had been wiped clean of messages and call logs. This deliberate act suggested that someone, either Daniel himself or another party, was determined to conceal vital information. Bennett expanded the investigation to include the Martins' financial records. Bank statements revealed several large cash withdrawals in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. These transactions were uncharacteristic for Daniel, who typically handled finances with meticulous care. One withdrawal coincided with a business trip to Portland, where Rachel had been working on a separate project. Another occurred just days before the family vanished. The findings deepened suspicions but offered no clear direction. Was Daniel preparing to leave his family, or was he being blackmailed? Could Jessica have discovered these withdrawals and acted out of rage, or was she being framed by someone else? The questions multiplied as the answers remained elusive. The community's anxiety reached a fever pitch when a local fisherman reported finding a bloodied piece of fabric along the riverbank, 10 miles from the Martins' home. Forensic analysis confirmed it was a section of Chloe's favorite blanket, the same one that had been missing from her bed. The discovery reignited fears that the children had met a grim fate, yet no other evidence surfaced in the area, leaving investigators frustrated and the public gripped by uncertainty. Bennett faced mounting pressure from her superiors to make an arrest, but she resisted, knowing that the case was far from airtight. The evidence pointed in multiple directions, and the emotional weight of the situation clouded her judgment. Jessica's apparent trauma, Rachel's evasive demeanor, and Daniel's mysterious financial activity each presented compelling but incomplete narratives. As Bennett reviewed the case files late one night, she was struck by a troubling thought. Every piece of evidence seemed deliberately placed, as if someone were orchestrating the investigation to divert attention. The blood trail, the wiped phone, the fabric by the river, all pointed toward a calculated effort to mislead. Was the true perpetrator manipulating events from the shadows, ensuring that suspicion fell where it was most convenient? With this unsettling realization, Bennett resolved to approach the case with renewed determination. She instructed her team to re-examine every detail, no matter how insignificant it seemed. The answers were there, hidden beneath layers of deceit, and she was determined to uncover them. The Martins' house, now sealed off with police tape, stood as a silent witness to the unfolding tragedy. Its walls concealed secrets that no forensic test could fully reveal. For now, the cul-de-sac remained a place of whispers and unanswered questions, as the community waited for the truth to emerge. Detective Laura Bennett stared at the photos spread across the conference table. Each image told a piece of a story: blood trails, discarded fabric, a wiped phone. But the narrative remained incomplete. The discovery of Chloe's blanket along the riverbank had rattled the investigation, introducing a grim possibility that the children were no longer alive. Yet there was no concrete evidence tying Jessica Martin or anyone else directly to their disappearance. The case felt like a puzzle where critical pieces had been deliberately hidden. The focus shifted toward retracing Jessica's movements in the days leading up to the disappearance. Surveillance footage revealed her visiting a hardware store, purchasing gloves, duct tape, and a roll of heavy-duty plastic. Her receipts showed an additional purchase of bleach from a different store on the same day. These actions raised suspicions, but Jessica insisted the items were for cleaning and organizing the garage, an explanation that failed to satisfy Bennett. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the blood in the Martin house continued to yield troubling results. Microscopic traces of bleach found on the kitchen floor indicated an attempt to clean up. In the garage, faint fingerprints were lifted from the back of Jessica's car, along with smudges of what appeared to be blood near the trunk latch. The evidence pointed to a hasty and incomplete cleanup effort, but without the bodies, it remained circumstantial. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when a search team, combing through a forested area near the river, stumbled upon a shallow grave. It was concealed beneath a mound of disturbed earth and covered with dry leaves. As the team excavated the site, they uncovered human remains wrapped in a plastic sheet. Forensic analysts later identified the body as Daniel Martin. The condition of the body suggested a violent end. Bruising around the neck and petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes indicated strangulation. The plastic wrapping bore faint impressions of duct tape, and Daniel's hands were bound. The gruesome discovery confirmed foul play, but it also raised more questions. If Jessica had committed the crime, why dispose of Daniel's body in such a conspicuous manner? And where were Chloe and Mia? Jessica's reaction to the discovery of her husband's body was mixed. She broke into tears during questioning, but avoided direct answers about her actions on the night of his disappearance. Her story changed slightly, with vague references to a potential argument with Daniel about their marriage and his infidelity. Bennett noted her evasiveness, but the absence of concrete proof kept Jessica free, though still under intense scrutiny. Another lead surfaced when a fisherman reported seeing a car matching the description of Jessica's vehicle parked near an abandoned industrial site on the outskirts of town. Investigators searched the area and found fresh tire tracks leading to an overgrown pathway. Following the trail, they discovered a large metal drum partially submerged in a shallow pond. Inside, they found the remains of Chloe and Mia. The scene was devastating. Both children showed signs of asphyxiation, their small bodies carefully placed in the drum. Nearby, police found strands of duct tape and remnants of the same plastic sheeting used to wrap Daniel's body. The discovery confirmed what many had feared, but it also deepened the mystery. The methodical nature of the disposal suggested premeditation, yet there were no clear answers as to the motive or sequence of events. Jessica was brought in for further questioning. Bennett, now more convinced of her involvement, pressed her on the timeline of events. Jessica maintained her innocence, claiming that she had no knowledge of the body's locations. Her composure, however, began to crack under the weight of the evidence. When presented with the receipts for the plastic and duct tape, Jessica hesitated before claiming that Daniel had asked her to purchase the items for a home improvement project. The inconsistencies in her story became glaring, but Bennett also couldn't ignore other potential angles. Rachel Brooks, Daniel's mistress, had disappeared from town shortly after the news of his death broke. Investigators tracked her down in Portland, where she provided an alibi supported by hotel records. Yet her sudden departure raised eyebrows, suggesting she might know more than she was willing to admit. As Bennett reviewed Rachel's statement, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if Jessica wasn't the only one with a motive? The methodical disposal of the bodies didn't entirely align with Jessica's panicked behavior. Could Rachel, angered by Daniel's reluctance to leave his family, have orchestrated the murders and manipulated the evidence to frame Jessica? Adding to the complexity was an anonymous tip received by the police hotline. The caller, who refused to identify themselves, claimed to have seen Jessica arguing with a man outside a gas station the night the family disappeared. The description of the man didn't match Daniel, but bore a vague resemblance to a former co-worker of Jessica's. Bennett ordered a follow-up on this lead, though it seemed to introduce more questions than answers. The pressure on the investigation intensified as media coverage of the case exploded. News outlets highlighted the tragic deaths of Chloe and Mia, painting Jessica as a grieving mother while simultaneously hinting at her potential involvement. The community, once supportive, began to turn against her. Protesters gathered outside her parents' home, demanding justice for the children. Amid the chaos, Bennett's instincts told her that the truth was more layered than it appeared. The evidence was damning but fragmented, leaving room for doubt. Was Jessica a cold-blooded killer, or was she being manipulated by someone else with a darker agenda? The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but the picture they formed remained blurred. As Bennett stared at the caseboard in her office, her gaze lingered on the photo of Chloe's blanket found at the riverbank. It was a small but significant detail, one that hinted at a timeline and a connection between the crime scenes. With renewed determination, she directed her team to revisit every piece of evidence, certain that the key to unlocking the mystery lay in the details. The Martin story, once a tale of suburban perfection, had become a nightmare of betrayal, secrets, and unimaginable loss. As the investigation pushed forward, one thing was clear. The truth would not come easily, and the cost of uncovering it would be steep. The discovery of Daniel's body and the horrifying revelation of Chloe and Mia's remains had shaken the investigation to its core. Yet Detective Laura Bennett couldn't escape the feeling that the story was far from complete. As the team pressed forward, new details began to surface, each one more disturbing than the last. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a forensic analysis of Jessica's laptop. Hidden within an encrypted folder were journal entries that painted a chilling picture of her state of mind in the months leading up to the murders. In these entries, Jessica expressed feelings of betrayal, anger, and desperation. She described Daniel's affair with Rachel Brooks in vivid detail, revealing that she had known about it long before hiring the private investigator. What stood out most, however, were passages hinting at a plan to restore order and protect her daughters from a broken family. These entries stopped abruptly 2 weeks before the disappearance, leaving investigators to speculate about whether Jessica had acted on these thoughts or if someone else had used them to frame her. Simultaneously, forensic technicians made a startling discovery in Jessica's car. While the blood near the trunk latch matched Daniel's, they found a partial fingerprint on the inside of the trunk that did not belong to Jessica, Daniel, or any of the children. This anomaly suggested that another person had been involved, someone who had yet to surface in the investigation. Another critical lead came from the anonymous tipster who had called earlier about Jessica arguing with a man at a gas station. After much coaxing, the caller finally agreed to meet with police in person. The tipster, identified as a truck driver named Mark Evans, described seeing Jessica in a heated exchange with a tall man wearing a baseball cap. While he couldn't hear their words, he noted the man's aggressive demeanor and how Jessica appeared visibly shaken after the encounter. This sighting occurred mere hours before the disappearance, placing another mysterious figure into the puzzle. Detective Bennett's team began cross-referencing the fingerprint with criminal databases, hoping to identify the unknown individual. At the same time, they revisited Rachel Brooks, who continued to deny any involvement. Rachel's alibi had held up initially, but further investigation revealed inconsistencies. Security footage from her hotel in Portland showed her checking in, but there was a 6-hour gap between her arrival and the time she was seen entering her room. Rachel insisted she had been meeting with clients during this period, but no records confirmed her claim. Meanwhile, the investigation into the family's finances yielded more troubling information. A series of wire transfers from Daniel's account to an unknown recipient had taken place in the weeks before his death. The amounts were substantial, enough to suggest blackmail or hush money. When investigators traced the recipient, they discovered the funds had been funneled into an offshore account registered to an alias. The account holder's identity remained a mystery, but the transactions added another layer of intrigue. As the pieces of the puzzle began to align, Jessica's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She started avoiding her parents' home, often disappearing for hours at a time. Surveillance teams followed her movements and noted visits to seemingly random locations, including a secluded cabin in the woods. A search of the property revealed nothing suspicious at first glance, but Bennett suspected the site held significance. Then came the most chilling discovery of all. Deep in the woods near the cabin, investigators uncovered a small, makeshift grave, marked only by a pile of stones. Inside, they found a collection of items: a bloodied kitchen knife, a burned photograph of the Martin family, and a child's bracelet engraved with Chloe's name. The scene felt calculated, as if someone was leaving behind breadcrumbs meant to taunt the investigation. The recovered knife was immediately sent for analysis, and the results further muddied the waters. The blood on the blade matched Daniel's, but the handle bore no usable prints. Instead, it had been wiped clean, another indication of careful planning. Forensic experts also determined that the knife's edge bore microscopic traces of ash, consistent with the charred photograph. Jessica was brought in for another round of questioning. This time, Bennett confronted her with the journal entries, the fingerprint, and the items found in the woods. Jessica broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, but her responses remained cryptic. She admitted to feeling overwhelmed by Daniel's betrayal and the pressure of holding her family together, but denied any involvement in their deaths. As Bennett listened, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica was hiding something. Her emotional outbursts felt genuine, but her refusal to address key details raised red flags. Was she protecting herself, or was there another layer to the story that even she couldn't face? The investigation took an unexpected turn when the fingerprint from Jessica's car matched a known felon, Vince Delgado, a former co-worker of Jessica's from her teaching days. Delgado had a history of domestic violence and had served time for assault. When detectives tracked him down, he was living in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of town. Delgado's initial reaction to being questioned was one of defiance. He claimed he hadn't seen Jessica in years and had no knowledge of the Martin family's fate. However, when pressed about the fingerprint, his story began to unravel. He admitted to meeting Jessica recently, but insisted it was a chance encounter and denied any wrongdoing. Bennett wasn't convinced. Delgado's background and his sudden reappearance in Jessica's life felt too coincidental. Further investigation revealed that Delgado had been in significant financial trouble, with debts mounting and no stable income. The wire transfers from Daniel's account now took on a new meaning. Could Delgado have been blackmailing Daniel, or was he involved in something even darker? As the chapter came to a close, Bennett faced a labyrinth of conflicting evidence and unanswered questions. Jessica's erratic behavior, Rachel's alibi inconsistencies, Delgado's sudden reemergence, and the anonymous tip all pointed to a conspiracy more tangled than she had imagined. Each revelation brought her closer to the truth, but it also exposed the depths of human deceit and desperation. The Martin case was no longer just a story of betrayal and murder. It had become a web of manipulation, greed, and secrets that threatened to consume everyone involved. The pieces of the Martin case were beginning to form a clearer picture, yet the gaps between them were wide and haunting. Detective Laura Bennett felt the pressure mounting as public outrage and media scrutiny intensified. Every new lead seemed to open another avenue of doubt, turning the investigation into an ever-deepening spiral. The discovery of Vincent Delgado's fingerprint in Jessica's car had added a volatile element to the case, and Bennett was determined to bring the man in for formal questioning. Delgado, however, proved elusive. When police returned to his apartment with a warrant, they found it abandoned. His few belongings were left in disarray, as if he had left in a hurry. The team scoured his residence, uncovering items that raised even more questions. A crumpled receipt for duct tape purchased the day before the Martin family disappeared, and a photograph of Jessica, Daniel, and their daughters taken at a community event months prior. The presence of the photograph confirmed that Delgado had been aware of the Martins well before the disappearance. It wasn't a random encounter as he had claimed. Further digging revealed that Delgado had once worked at the same middle school where Jessica had taught, though their employment didn't overlap by much. Colleagues from that time described Delgado as overly familiar with female coworkers and prone to aggressive outbursts when rejected. Jessica's name surfaced in these recollections, though no one could recall any specific incidents between the two. As Delgado remained at large, Bennett turned her attention back to Jessica, whose behavior continued to raise alarms. Surveillance of her movements revealed a pattern of late-night drives to remote areas, though she appeared to be aimlessly wandering rather than meeting anyone. The team monitored her closely, suspecting she might lead them to Delgado or some hidden evidence. One night, Jessica stopped at the same wooded cabin investigators had searched earlier. This time, her actions suggested she wasn't alone. Hidden cameras set up around the property captured Jessica arguing with an unidentified man. The footage was grainy, but Delgado's build and mannerisms matched the figure. He gestured wildly while Jessica appeared to plead with him, her hands raised defensively. The encounter ended abruptly, with Delgado storming off into the woods and Jessica retreating to her car. By the time police arrived, both were gone, leaving only tire tracks in the mud and broken branches along Delgado's escape path. The confrontation shifted the investigation into high gear. Bennett's team redoubled their efforts to track Delgado, issuing an alert to surrounding counties and deploying search teams in the forested area. Meanwhile, Bennett began to press Jessica harder, presenting her with the footage and demanding answers. Jessica remained evasive, claiming she didn't know Delgado well and insisting their encounter was coincidental. Her story grew increasingly implausible as the evidence against her mounted. The forensic analysis of the knife found near the cabin delivered another twist. While Daniel's blood was confirmed on the blade, forensic experts identified a second DNA profile on the handle, Delgado's. This revelation tied him directly to the crime scene, but the question of motive loomed large. Was Delgado working alone, or was he acting on someone else's behalf? And why had Jessica met him multiple times since the murders? As the team pieced together Delgado's timeline, they discovered he had been employed at a construction site near Daniel's workplace. Witnesses recalled seeing him arguing with Daniel in a parking lot weeks before the murders. The altercation had reportedly turned physical, though neither man filed a report. Colleagues described Daniel as uncharacteristically tense afterward, frequently taking calls that seemed to agitate him. This confrontation added weight to the theory that Delgado had been blackmailing Daniel, but it still didn't explain the killings. The investigation took another chilling turn when Bennett received a letter. The envelope, postmarked from a nearby city, contained a single sheet of paper with a cryptic message. "She's not as innocent as she seems." There was no signature, but the handwriting didn't match Delgado's or Jessica's. The note suggested a third party might be involved, someone aware of the Martins' secrets and intent on keeping the truth buried. With tension at its peak, a new witness emerged. A hiker who frequented the trails near the cabin reported seeing a car matching Jessica's description parked near an abandoned barn days after the family disappeared. Investigators descended on the location, discovering signs of a makeshift campsite. Among the debris, they found a torn piece of cloth that matched the missing sleeve from Daniel's shirt. Nearby, buried under loose dirt, were several empty gas canisters and burnt remains of documents. Forensic analysis revealed faint traces of Daniel's signature on the charred fragments, suggesting they had been financial records. The discovery painted a grim picture of deliberate planning and cover-up, but the involvement of multiple parties muddied the narrative. Delgado's fingerprint on the knife, Jessica's erratic behavior, and the anonymous letter all pointed to a conspiracy rather than a single perpetrator. Bennett's instincts told her that Jessica was hiding more than she let on, but she couldn't discount the possibility that Delgado, or even someone else, was manipulating her. The culmination of these findings led to a major breakthrough when Delgado was finally apprehended during a routine traffic stop in a neighboring state. His capture was swift, and he was transported back to Seattle for interrogation. Delgado initially refused to speak, demanding a lawyer, but his demeanor shifted when he learned of the evidence tying him to the murders. His silence gave way to a stream of accusations, most of them directed at Jessica. Delgado claimed that Jessica had orchestrated the murders, using him as an unwilling accomplice. According to his account, Jessica had reached out to him under the guise of needing help with a personal problem. She had lured him to the house where she revealed her plan to remove Daniel and the children. Delgado insisted he had tried to back out, but Jessica had threatened him, leveraging his criminal history against him. While parts of his story aligned with the evidence, Bennett noted inconsistencies that suggested Delgado was attempting to shift blame. As the chapter drew to a close, Bennett faced a web of lies and half-truths. Delgado's account, though incriminating, didn't absolve him of involvement, and Jessica's silence only deepened her guilt in the eyes of the investigators. The anonymous letter hinted at a larger conspiracy, and the financial records suggested motives that extended beyond personal betrayal. The case had become a vortex of deception, dragging everyone involved into its depths. With Delgado in custody and Jessica under relentless scrutiny, Bennett prepared for the next phase of the investigation, knowing that the truth was within reach but would demand even greater sacrifices to uncover. Detective Laura Bennett's office had become a chaotic collage of evidence. Photographs of the Martin family, crime scene maps, DNA reports, and handwritten notes from interviews plastered the walls, creating a web of connections that seemed to lead everywhere and nowhere. Despite the mounting evidence, the case remained maddeningly elusive. Delgado's confession, while damning, was riddled with inconsistencies, and Jessica's silence cast an ominous shadow over her potential involvement. The team analyzed Delgado's claim that Jessica had masterminded the murders. He described her as manipulative, recounting how she had allegedly promised to pay him a substantial sum to take care of a problem. Delgado insisted he never intended to harm the children, but claimed Jessica had forced his hand, threatening to implicate him if he didn't cooperate. His version of events was chilling, but certain details, such as the timing of the murders and the disposal of the bodies, didn't align with the forensic timeline. Bennett decided to press Jessica once more. Armed with Delgado's confession, she confronted Jessica with the accusations. Jessica's reaction was explosive. Tears streamed down her face as she vehemently denied every word. She accused Delgado of being a violent liar and claimed she had only interacted with him to fend off his unwanted advances. Her defiance was convincing, but Bennett noticed a flicker of hesitation when asked why Delgado's fingerprint was found in her car. Meanwhile, investigators uncovered a new lead. Bank records revealed that Jessica had withdrawn a large sum of cash from her personal savings account shortly before the murders. This contradicted her earlier claims of financial strain, raising questions about where the money had gone. When pressed, Jessica claimed it was to pay off lingering debts, but the absence of corresponding transactions suggested otherwise. The plot thickened when another anonymous letter arrived at the precinct. This time, the message was even more cryptic. "Look closer at what's missing." Alongside the note was a photograph of Daniel standing in front of the Martin family home, his arm draped over Jessica's shoulders. The photo had been torn in half, leaving only Daniel and the house visible. The sender's intentions were unclear, but Bennett interpreted the message as a challenge to revisit the foundational elements of the case. Acting on this hunch, Bennett ordered a second search of the Martin property. This time, the team employed ground-penetrating radar to scan the backyard. To their shock, they detected a disturbance beneath the garden shed. Digging beneath the structure, they uncovered a weathered lockbox containing a blood-stained shirt and a notebook filled with Daniel's handwriting. The entries in the notebook suggested he had been aware of Jessica's increasingly erratic behavior and was documenting her actions as a precaution. One entry in particular stood out. "She knows about Rachel. She keeps saying the girls will be better off. I don't know what she means, but I'm starting to worry. I can't leave them alone with her anymore." The discovery added a harrowing new dimension to the case. If Daniel had been fearful for his daughter's safety, why hadn't he acted sooner? And why hadn't he confided in anyone? While the lockbox painted a damning portrait of Jessica, Delgado's role in the murders remained unresolved. Forensic analysis of the duct tape and plastic sheeting used to wrap Daniel's body revealed traces of Delgado's DNA, further tying him to the crime. However, experts noted that the tape appeared to have been handled by two people, suggesting collaboration. Bennett's suspicions of a larger conspiracy grew when a local security guard came forward with a disturbing account. He reported seeing Delgado and an unidentified woman arguing in a parking lot near the industrial site where Chloe and Mia's remains had been found. The guard described the woman as petite with dark hair, a description that matched Jessica, but could also describe Rachel Brooks. Security footage from the area was reviewed, but the angle and quality of the cameras left the individuals' identities ambiguous. As tensions escalated, Rachel Brooks resurfaced, demanding to speak with investigators. Her demeanor was fraught with anxiety as she revealed she had received threatening emails in the weeks leading up to the murders. The messages, sent from an anonymous account, accused her of destroying lives and warned her to watch her back. Rachel claimed she had initially dismissed them as pranks, but now believed they were connected to the case. Rachel also dropped a bombshell revelation. Daniel had confided in her about a hidden safe in the Martin home, where he kept important documents and cash. The safe was discovered behind a false panel in the master bedroom closet. Inside, investigators found evidence that reframed the entire case. A contract signed by Daniel and Rachel, outlining plans to leave Seattle and relocate together, and a copy of Jessica's private investigator's report on the affair. The most shocking find, however, was a handwritten letter from Jessica addressed to Daniel. The letter alternated between pleas for reconciliation and veiled threats, stating, "If you think you can just walk away, you're wrong. The girls will never be part of your twisted fantasy life." The tone was desperate, hinting at Jessica's emotional unraveling in the days before the murders. With this trove of evidence, Bennett felt the walls closing in on Jessica. However, Delgado's involvement in Rachel's potential connection complicated the narrative. The anonymous letters, the security guard's sighting, and the mysterious emails to Rachel all suggested there were more players in this twisted game. The chapter reached its crescendo when forensic linguists analyzed the anonymous letters and compared them to known samples of Jessica's handwriting. The results were inconclusive, but subtle similarities suggested she might have written them, or someone close to her might have. This revelation further blurred the lines between victim and perpetrator, leaving Bennett grappling with a case that refused to yield a clear resolution. As Bennett stood before the evidence board, she realized the case had become a chess match. Each move revealed new threats and hidden players, but the identity of the mastermind remained elusive. The investigation was hurtling toward a breaking point, and Bennett knew the next discovery could either crack the case wide open or send it spiraling into chaos. The Martins' once idyllic life had been shattered, leaving behind a legacy of betrayal, manipulation, and unimaginable loss. With tensions at their peak, the stage was set for a revelation that would either bring justice or plunge the investigation into darkness. Detective Laura Bennett felt the weight of the case bearing down on her as she entered the interrogation room for what she hoped would be the final time. Across the table sat Jessica Martin, her face pale and drawn, the once confident mask she wore now replaced by a hollow gaze. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and there was nowhere left to hide. The truth was about to come out, in all its horrifying detail. Jessica began to speak, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. She described the moment she learned of Daniel's affair with Rachel Brooks. "It wasn't just betrayal," she said. "It was erasure. Everything I was, everything I had built, was gone in an instant. He was planning a life without me, and I couldn't let that happen." Jessica revealed that her initial plan was to confront Rachel, to ruin her reputation and force her out of Daniel's life. But as the weeks passed, her anger festered into something darker. She began to see Daniel not as her husband, but as an enemy. The idea of him taking Chloe and Mia and starting over with Rachel became unbearable. "If I couldn't have them," she said, "no one could." On the night of the murders, Jessica waited until Daniel was home and the children were asleep. She confronted him in the kitchen, accusing him of destroying their family. When Daniel refused to engage and began packing a bag to leave, Jessica snapped. She grabbed a knife from the counter and stabbed him repeatedly. "I don't even remember how many times," she admitted. "I just needed him to stop." Jessica paused, her hands trembling as she recounted the next part. Chloe and Mia had woken up and come downstairs, drawn by the commotion. Chloe, the older of the two, immediately understood what had happened. She began crying, asking why their father wasn't moving. Jessica claimed she panicked, fearing the children would hate her or reveal what she had done. "I told myself I was protecting them," she said, "but the truth is I couldn't face their questions. I couldn't face what I had become." She described how she smothered Chloe first, using a pillow from the couch. The little girl fought back, clawing at Jessica's hands, but her small frame was no match for her mother's strength. Mia, confused and frightened, clung to Jessica, asking what was wrong with Chloe. "She trusted me," Jessica said, her voice breaking for the first time. "She didn't even cry. She just let me hold her while I took her life too." Jessica's confession was chilling in its cold rationality. She admitted to calling Delgado after the murders, fabricating a story about Daniel attacking her and begging for his help. Delgado arrived at the house to find the bodies, and despite his initial shock, agreed to help Jessica dispose of them. "He was desperate," Jessica said. "I knew he wouldn't say no." The disposal was methodical. Daniel's body was buried in a shallow grave, while Chloe and Mia were placed in oil tanks at a remote site to prevent their discovery. Jessica's calculated actions extended to creating the anonymous letters, planting suspicion on Rachel, and ensuring her own alibi. Every detail had been meticulously planned, but her emotional unraveling ultimately led to her capture. When asked about the letters, Jessica hesitated before admitting that not all of them were her doing. The forensic analysis of the handwriting had been correct. Carol Avery, her former neighbor, had written the later letters. Carol, unaware of the murders, had been manipulated into thinking Rachel was a threat and believed she was helping Jessica protect her family. The final revelation came when Bennett pressed Jessica about her motivations. "You could have stopped," Bennett said. "You could have chosen another path." Jessica's response was chilling. "There was no other path. I didn't just lose them. I lost myself." The trial was swift and damning. Jessica was convicted on 3 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Delgado, though complicit, received a lesser sentence of 15 years for his role as an accessory. His testimony was critical in securing Jessica's conviction, but his guilt for participating in such a heinous crime would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Martin case left an indelible mark on everyone involved. For Detective Bennett, it was a sobering reminder of the destructive power of jealousy and unchecked emotions. Jessica's descent into violence was a cautionary tale about the importance of seeking help and addressing mental health issues before they spiral out of control. The tragedy also highlighted the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of betrayal. Rachel Brooks, while innocent of the murders, bore the burden of her role in the chain of events that led to the tragedy. For Delgado, the case was a painful lesson about the cost of complicity and the consequences of being drawn into someone else's darkness. For the community, the Martin story was a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Behind the facade of a perfect family lay secrets and tensions that ultimately led to their destruction. The case underscored the importance of open communication, support systems, and the courage to face difficult truths. Detective Bennett, reflecting on the case, often thought of Chloe and Mia. Their lives, so full of promise, had been cut short by the very person meant to protect them. The tragedy of their deaths served as a haunting reminder of the stakes involved in every case she worked. Justice, while served, could never undo the heartbreak of lives lost too soon. The story has been edited to ensure personal privacy and security regarding names and locations. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe to see the latest and most thrilling family crime stories. Don't miss the case tomorrow, where everything will be revealed.